Was he really evil, or was he just a misunderstood entity? As the ancient Egyptian god of chaos, war, and disorder, Seth was the deity ruling over the dangerous lands outside Egypt, as opposed to the fertile Black Land of Kemet. He was often thought to represent the dry and desert lands of distant places, contrary to his brother Osiris, who symbolized the fertility of the Nile River Valley. At all periods, Seth was associated with the dangerous aspects of the desert, becoming the deity personifying everything that the Egyptians feared from the desert regions. But he remained Lord of the oasis that made it possible for one to survive the dangers encountered while crossing the western desert. According to the ancient Egyptians, Seth is one of the first 5 gods born from the union of Geb and Nut right after the creation of the world. He then went by few other names, among which Set, Seth, and Seti, usually translated as instigator of confusion and destroyer, because he was related with disorder, chaos, foreign lands, and the color red for some reason. Ancient texts assign various spouses to Seth, but his most popular triad of consorts included his sister Nephthys and 2 warlike Western Semitic goddesses known as Anat and Astarte. Seth himself is usually depicted in human form with the head of a strange animal with 8 ears plus a long curving snout. He is also represented wholly as a red beast with a forked tail, in which case it bears no resemblance to any living creature. This led many to identify the sinister animal as a purely mythological creature imagined to represent the god Seth. Seth had many epithets, which include Lord of the Desert and Ruler of the South. Being one of the most complex gods of the Egyptian pantheon, Seth was the envious adversary of his brother Osiris. As the firstborn, Osiris was chosen as the supreme ruler of the land, but after finding the newly created people to be barbarous and uncivilized, he gave them culture, provided them with laws, and instructed the people in the proper ways to worship the gods. The land was a paradise in which everyone was equal under the reign of the royal couple. There was a lot of food and no one suffered from any need. Seth grew jealous of his brother's power, resented his success, and decided to remove him for good. His resentment grew even more after his wife Nephthys disguised herself as Isis to seduce the great king and became pregnant with the mortuary god Anubis. Seth was a natural opponent of Horus the Elder and occasionally appeared as the great rival of Horus the Younger over the crown of Egypt. Alternatively, this conflict could be stated in terms of a dynastic feud and a struggle for justice between the usurper Seth and the posthumous son of Osiris. From a variety of stories, Seth is a deity who usually represents hostility and violence, but who has claimed considerable respect from others as well. For almost 2,000 years, the Egyptians thought of him as a god of exclusive positive qualities, especially as the protector against storms and warfare, or as the deity who looked after the son Ra from the terrible serpent Apophis. In the early dynastic period, Seth was a benevolent god whose name was invoked in love spells, so important that around the middle of the 3rd millennium, there was a break with the tradition whereby the pharaohs were aligned with the god Horus. And because of this reason, the falcon symbolism of Horus was often replaced with that of a Sethian creature, and few Egyptian rulers followed his cult. However, some scriptures mention that after the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, the perception of Seth changed because his predilection for causing trouble increased. By the time of the New Kingdom, He was regarded as the villain who committed a series of sacrilegious crimes and came to be best known as the murderer of his older brother. He even became notorious for breaking sexual taboos, and his violent and ruthless nature is described in 3 famous stories. In the first myth, he killed the sky deity and brother, blind Horus. In the second myth, he resisted the authority of his other brother, the wise ruler Osiris, whom he eventually murdered, then scattered his body all around the Nile. Even after Isis gathered all pieces of her husband's body, Seth kept on coming to attack it by disguising himself so many times. But unfortunately, he was always recognized and brutally punished by Anubis. We can note here that because Osiris represents life in a way, the secretions from his decaying body were believed to play an important role into making the Nile rise, to make the crops grow and even make women conceive children. In other words, these attacks against his body were attacks on life itself. Sometimes later, Seth finally took the throne and the peaceful balance which had been maintained by Osiris and Isis was lost. He was a chaotic and unpredictable lord who brought storms and drought upon the land, leaving the people with no other choice but to turn on each other in their efforts to survive. This in turn led to an 80 years bitter war opposing Seth and Horus, also known as the contendings of Horus and Seth, which is the account of the legal battle before the gods over the seats belonging to the king of Egypt. In the course of this long-lasting battle, the two lords alternated between arguing their cases in front of the divine tribunal and fighting each other. Some sources claim that the majority of judges decided that Horus was the one to rule, but Ra was not convinced, believing that Horus was too young to effectively rule. Meanwhile, Seth had proven to be a capable monarch. This trial went on for years while the people of Egypt suffered under the chaotic reign of Seth, and only a forceful dispute finally resulted in his defeat. Even though it was mentioned that the land was equally divided between them both, the gods revoked the portion of Seth but gave him dominion over the desert regions, thereby leaving Horus as the overlord of the unified kingdoms of Egypt. Order was restored and the equality of the people was renewed. The cult of Seth seems to have started in Upper Egypt, though it was later identified with foreign gods worshipped in the eastern delta. But this has come to an end when Egypt's foreign empire gradually diminished. Seth was primarily worshipped as a skull saint in the city of Umbos, but had temples honoring him across the land. As with the other gods, the clergy of Seth was responsible for daily rituals and took care of his statues which no one else could draw near to. The people petitioning the god for help were never allowed in the sanctuary, but only in the outer courtyards of the temples where they would leave their donations or make their requests for assistance regarding their lives. During the Greco-Roman period, Seth was vilified in most temples, and the Greeks identified him with the monster Typhoon, who challenged the might of Zeus and was hurled into Tartarus. The Egyptian god Seth was invoked in spells to kill the conjurer's enemies as he had killed his own brother, or to separate lovers as he had separated Osiris and Isis. Since he has been known that Seth was originally a hero god who protected the solar bark against Apophis, it makes sense that the king would choose him as his patron god. But this still does not explain the departure from their identification with Horus. He was even raised up by the time of Ramesses II, in a timeline where he had been transformed into the villain who stood for everything the Egyptians hated the most: disorder, waste, drought, destruction, and foreign invasion or influence. so he might still have had some resonant associations with his former role as a protector god for him to have been elevated to such a degree by Ramesses II. But based on the fact that the cult of Osiris and Isis was so widespread by this time, it would be difficult to understand how Seth stood out. His attributes and image changing from a hero god to the enemy of order and justice is not clear either. But by the time the Osiris myth became popular during the New Kingdom, his transformation was complete. His reputation among the Egyptians had turned so negative that he was usually portrayed as the embodiment of evil, and many of his statues were recarved into statues of other deities. Although he was a member of the 9 primordial gods of Heliopolis, Seth was a separated and a social god called the enemy of boundaries. His existence, however terrible, was vital to the continuance of the world, with the concept of harmony being integral to Egyptian values and featuring even in the understanding of the afterlife. Therefore, the enduring popularity of Seth is probably due to the Egyptians' appreciation of balance and harmony. As a god of fertility and life, Osiris required a counterpart in the form of Seth as a god of destruction and chaos. Even in this role, Seth was considered beneficial as he voluntarily held back his desert forces of dry winds and drought from the fertile lands of Kemet. Like many aspects of the Osiris myth, Seth was incorporated into the early Christianity as the devil. His relationship to darkness and wickedness, as well as the famous image of him as a red beast, followed the iconography of the Christian Satan. Like the Christian devil, Seth brought about the end of paradise and was cast out for rebelling against harmonious rule. His association with deceit, cunning, war, destruction, and his close connection with the serpent Apophis also worked well in fashioning the Christian concept of the supernatural deceiver of humanity who swore eternal enmity to God. Seth continued to play the role he had been given by the Osiris myth in a whole new context and belief system, as the deceiver and adversary of humanity, responsible for their suffering in a world originally created as a paradise by his brother. In a way, Seth acted as a catalyst in the Egyptian religion. His thoughtless actions are wrong in themselves but can lead to good results. His brutality was needed by the gods to defend the solar boat from the chaos monster Apophis, who threatened the sun as he entered the underworld each dawn. All that in order to prevent it from bringing light upon the world the next day. I hope this video was insightful. If so, then consider leaving a like, subscribe, share. Don't forget to drop me a comment. And as always, stay curious.